Imagine ruling the most powerful nation on Earth for centuries, controlling 1/3 of the entire world's wealth, with foreign kings literally begging to trade with you. Now imagine watching it all collapse because of one plant. Not guns, not bombs, not some super weapon. A flower, a single flowering plant brought your entire civilization to its knees. This isn't fantasy. This is the story of how opium destroyed China's greatest empire. In the 1700s, China was the undisputed economic superpower of the world. European monarchs were desperate to get Chinese goods, but the Chinese emperor basically yawned and said, "We don't need anything you barbarians make." Fast forward just 100 years, and China was carved up by foreign powers. Millions of its people were addicted to drugs, and its 2,000-year-old imperial system was crumbling. This is how it happened. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in England while I'm recording this at night, here in the States. Alright, let's head back to Qing Dynasty China. But hold on, get comfortable first. I mean it. Fix your pillows, grab that blanket. This one's worth settling in for. The year is 1800. Dawn breaks over Canton Harbour in southern China. Your eyes crack open to darkness inside the small room you've rented near the waterfront. The overwhelming smell of salt water, spices, and humanity drifts through the window. Outside, the sound of shouting merchants, creaking wood, and clanging metal fills the air as ships from across the world unload their goods. Unlike your modern memory foam mattress, you're lying on a wooden platform with a thin mat that does absolutely nothing to cushion your aching back. It's already hot, humid as hell, and you haven't even gotten up yet. You're in Canton, the only Chinese port where foreign merchants are allowed to trade, and let me tell you, there's no place on earth with more money flowing through it right now than this city. Hold up, you might be thinking. I thought European countries were the richest in the world during this time. That's what your history textbooks probably told you, but nope. Not even close. China was so economically dominant in 1800 that it produced over 1/3 of everything made on the entire planet. Think about that. One country making 1/3 of the world's stuff. That would be like if the modern United States, Japan, and Germany's economies were all combined into one superpower. European merchants were literally begging to be allowed to trade with China, and China's response? Basically, yeah, we're good, thanks. The Chinese emperor viewed the Western kingdoms as barbarian states with nothing of value to offer the Middle Kingdom. But what about all their cool inventions? Well, from China's perspective, they'd invented pretty much everything worth inventing already. Paper, Chinese. Printing, Chinese. Gunpowder, Chinese. Compass, Chinese. Porcelain so fine you could see through it. Silk so luxurious, European nobility would bankrupt themselves to own it. All Chinese. When foreign merchants arrived in Canton, they weren't treated as equals. They were barely tolerated, and the trading system was set up to keep it that way. Listen up, here's how this works, a local official explains as you watch Western merchants arrive. Foreigners can only trade in Canton, nowhere else in our vast empire. They can only live in these specific buildings outside the city walls called factories. Not actual factories, but trading houses. They cannot bring their wives or families. They cannot learn Chinese. They cannot travel into the Chinese interior. And most importantly, they can only trade through the approved Chinese merchants known as the Hong merchants. The most powerful of these Hong merchants is a man named Haokua, and oh my god, this guy is rich, not just wealthy, not just successful businessman rich, we're talking the richest man on the planet rich. His personal fortune is estimated at around $26 million, which doesn't sound that impressive until you realise that's like multiple billions in today's money. The dude literally had rooms filled with silver. During a fire in 1822, witnesses described rivers of silver flowing through the streets as Hauqua's vaults melted in the flames. You're at the harbour watching a British East India Company ship unload, and you spot him, Hauqua, dressed in elegant silk robes, directing his army of clerks and assistants. His hands are clasped behind his back as he watches crates of silver being carried off the ship. "That's how the trade works," whispers a merchant standing next to you. "We bring silver, they give us tea, silk, and porcelain." It seems like a simple enough system. Europeans and Americans want Chinese luxury goods, especially tea, which had become an absolute obsession in England. The Chinese don't want European goods in return, so the Westerners pay in silver. The problem for the Western traders is that this arrangement is draining their treasuries dry. "We can't keep shipping all our silver to China," the merchant continues. "England's running out of the bloody stuff." You can see the frustration on the faces of the British traders. They're making money selling Chinese goods back home, but the trade imbalance is unsustainable. They need something the Chinese will buy, and that's where our story really begins, because the British found something that would turn this entire system upside down: opium. You see an unusual ship anchored in the harbour, flying no flags. The local Chinese seem to be avoiding it, yet small boats occasionally slip out to it under cover of darkness. "Turkish and Indian opium," the merchant explains. "Technically illegal in China, but..." He shrugs. Opium wasn't new to China. It had been used medicinally for centuries, usually eaten or drunk as a tincture to treat pain or illness. But something changed when Europeans introduced the practice of smoking it. "Come on," says the merchant, "I'll show you." He leads you through the crowded streets to a nondescript building a few blocks from the waterfront. Inside, the air is thick with sweet, acrid smoke. Men lie on wooden platforms, their eyes half closed as attendants prepare pipes for them. The pipes themselves are works of art, long stems with ornate metal bowls. You watch as an attendant heats a small ball of dark, sticky opium over a flame until it bubbles, then places it in the pipe bowl for a waiting customer. "For one puff and your troubles fade away," the merchant says. "Two puffs and you're floating, three and you're in paradise." What you're witnessing is the beginning of something catastrophic. At this moment, opium is still primarily smoked by the wealthy elite. Government officials, rich merchants, men of leisure, it's a luxury drug, a status symbol. But that's about to change. The merchant leans in closer. The British East India Company has opium plantations all across Bengal now. They're producing thousands of chests of the stuff every year. And guess where it's all coming? He nods toward the harbour. A chest of opium contained about 140 pounds of the drug. In 1800, around 4,500 chests were being imported to China. That's 630,000 pounds of opium. And demand was growing. The following morning, you're back at the harbour. The activity is frenetic, goods moving in all directions, silver flowing into China, luxury goods flowing out. It's the most successful trading arrangement in the world, but it's balanced on a knife's edge. As you watch, a group of British merchants stands apart from the others, talking intently. You recognise one of them, William Jardine, a former ship's surgeon turned merchant. Next to him is his business partner, James Matheson. These two Scotsmen would eventually found Jardine, Matheson and Company, one of the most profitable drug smuggling operations in history. "The Chinese want to keep us confined to Canton," Jardine is saying, "but with fast clipper ships we can deliver opium all along the coast." You're witnessing the planning of what would become the most successful drug smuggling enterprise in history, and the Chinese government has no idea what's coming. Back in the trading factory, you observe the complex dance of commerce. The Chinese Hong merchants are in a difficult position. They're immensely wealthy, but they're caught between the demands of the imperial government and the foreign traders they deal with. They're responsible for the foreigners' behavior and are expected to ensure taxes are paid and regulations followed. Hao is clever, someone comments. He's investing much of his fortune overseas through his American partners. He doesn't trust the imperial officials not to seize it. Smart move on his part, because the system that's made him the richest man on Earth is about to come crashing down. Later that day, you're invited to a banquet hosted by Hao himself for his American trading partners. It's an extraordinary honor rarely extended to foreigners. His mansion is a vision of luxury, exquisite gardens, priceless antiques, and a banquet that stretches on for hours with dozens of exotic dishes. 15 courses, an American merchant whispers to you. Bird's nest soup, shark fins, pigeon eggs. This feast alone probably cost more than most people make in a year. What's fascinating is the relationship between Hao and these American traders. They've developed a genuine friendship and mutual respect that transcends business. The Americans help manage Hao's overseas investments, and he gives them preferential treatment in Canton. As the evening winds down, Hao raises a toast to prosperity and friendship between our peoples. Everyone drinks, but there's tension in the air. The Americans know what's coming with the opium trade, and they're conflicted. One of them, Robert Bennett Forbes, would later write to his wife, "I made my first fortune by the same," referring to opium, while acknowledging the drug was demoralizing the minds and destroying the bodies and draining the country of money. The merchants are already getting rich, but they have no idea how much wealthier and how much more destructive this trade is about to become. Back in your room that night, you lie on your uncomfortable bed, the sounds of the harbour drifting through the window. You've witnessed Canton at the height of its glory, the centre of global trade, where the world's wealth flows through the hands of merchants like Hao. But something fundamental is shifting. The balance of power that has favoured China for centuries is beginning to tilt. In the next decade, the amount of opium smuggled into China will increase tenfold. The drug will spread from the elite to ordinary people across the empire. Silver will begin flowing out of China instead of in. And the emperor in Beijing, thousands of miles away from Canton, will finally realize too late that his great empire faces an existential threat. Not from armies or navies, from a flower, from the milky sap of the poppy plant, processed into a sticky resin that produces the most intense euphoria humans had ever experienced. As you drift off to sleep, the sweet, sickly smell of opium smoke drifts in through your window. All around you, in hidden rooms and behind closed doors, more and more Chinese are taking up the pipe. The addiction is spreading, and with it, the seeds of destruction for the world's greatest empire are being sown. Not with a bang, but with the soft hiss of opium smoke being drawn through an ornate pipe. In the moonlight, ships continue to arrive in Canton Harbour. On their manifests, silver, cotton, wool, but in hidden compartments, thousands of balls of opium, ready to be sold to eager Chinese buyers. Each chest of opium is stamped with the symbol of the British East India Company, the very institution that had been granted a monopoly on trade by the British Crown, now the world's biggest drug dealer. You close your eyes, the humidity making it hard to sleep, thinking about how something as simple as a trade imbalance and a flowering plant is about to change the course of human history. Tomorrow, Canton will wake up and continue its business, unaware that the entire system is about to collapse, unaware that this golden age of Chinese prosperity is coming to an end. And it all starts here, with a pipe, with smoke, with dreams, with addiction, with opium. The morning fog hangs over Canton Harbour as a new day begins. 10 years have passed, it's now 1830, and everything has changed. What you're about to witness isn't just the story of a drug taking hold of a nation, it's the tale of how the world's economic order flipped upside down in the span of a single generation. Silver. For centuries, it flowed into China like a mighty river. Now, it's hemorrhaging out, bleeding away at a rate that would give an economist a heart attack. You're probably thinking, how bad could it really be? I mean, it's just some people smoking in back rooms, right? Wrong. Let me paint you the picture. You're walking through a narrow alley in Canton. The smell hits you first, that distinct, sweet, acrid scent of opium smoke that now permeates every corner of the city. You step into what looks like an ordinary tea house, but inside, the scene is anything but ordinary. The room is dim, illuminated only by small oil lamps. The air is thick with bluish smoke that hangs in layers. On wooden platforms covered with bamboo mats lie dozens of people. Not just the wealthy merchants and officials you saw a decade ago. Everyone, and I mean everyone. There's a government clerk, his official cap set aside as he takes long draws from his pipe. Next to him is a dock worker, his muscles wasted from months of choosing the pipe over food. In the corner, a woman who once ran a successful silk shop stares vacantly at the ceiling. A Buddhist monk still in his saffron robes lies motionless nearby. What happened here? You whisper to the attendant who's preparing a pipe for a new customer. He shrugs. Cheaper opium. Lots of it. Anyone can afford it now. And he's right. In 1820, about 4,500 chests of opium were being smuggled into China annually. By 1830, that number had exploded to nearly 20,000 chests. We're talking about 2.8 million pounds of opium every single year. But here's where it gets truly insane. By 1838, it would reach 40,000 chests. That's 5.6 million pounds of opium flowing into a single country annually. Picture 2,800 tons of drugs. That's roughly the weight of 500 elephants worth of opium entering China each year. Outside the den, you pass a small group of British merchants huddled in conversation. You recognise one. William Jardine, who you saw a decade earlier. He's no longer just a merchant. He's now one of the wealthiest men in Asia. The new clipper ships are magnificent, he tells his associates. 32 days from Calcutta to Linton Island. The Chinese patrol boats can't touch us. His partner, James Matheson, nods in agreement. We've got warehouses full on Linton now. The local smugglers take it from there. Linton Island, just outside Chinese territorial waters, had become an offshore base for the opium trade. Western ships would anchor there, beyond the reach of Chinese law, and transfer their illegal cargo to fast Chinese smuggling boats that would deliver it up the Pearl River to Canton and beyond. It's like they invented DoorDash for drugs, you might be thinking. And honestly, that's not far off. But the real genius, or evil, depending on your perspective, of the Western opium merchants wasn't just their smuggling network, it was how they solved their original problem, the trade imbalance. Here's how it worked now. British merchants would grow opium in India, controlled by the British East India Company, ship it to China, and sell it to Chinese smugglers for silver. Then they'd use that silver to buy Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain. The trade deficit had flipped. Now silver was flowing out of China at an alarming rate. You witness a meeting between Hao Kwa and several other Hong merchants. The stress on their faces is evident. The price of silver has doubled in 10 years, one says grimly. Our currency is collapsing. Hao Kwa nods, his expression grave. The provincial government demands we stop the opium trade, yet their own officials are the biggest customers. My cousin's entire village near Suzhou has fallen to the pipe, another merchant adds. The fields lie untended, no one works anymore. This is the brutal reality of what's happening. In areas where opium has taken hold, productivity collapses, fields go unplanted, workshops sit empty, people sell everything they own, their tools, their furniture, even their land, to buy more opium. As you walk through Canton, you notice something else. The city seems poorer than a decade ago. Despite all the trade, despite all the activity, there's a sense of decay. Buildings that were once pristine are now crumbling. People who once seemed prosperous now appear gaunt and desperate. What's happening to the city? You ask a local shopkeeper. He glances around nervously before answering. Silver leaves, nothing comes in to replace it. Even the provincial officials are struggling to collect taxes. The economic impact was devastating. China had been on a silver standard, meaning its currency was backed by silver. As silver flowed out of the country to pay for opium, the value of money plummeted and inflation soared. Imagine if the US dollar lost half its value in just a few years. That's what the Chinese were experiencing. The sun is setting as you make your way to a different part of the city. Here, away from the harbour, you find a modest home where a family is gathering for dinner. The tension is palpable. Father hasn't come home again, a young woman tells her mother as she sets out bowls of rice. He's at the smoking house. The mother's face is lined with worry and resignation. Your brother too, 3 days now. He sold his fishing nets, the daughter says quietly. What will he do when he has nothing left to sell? The mother has no answer. This scene was playing out in countless homes across China. Addiction was tearing families apart, destroying livelihoods and weakening the very fabric of society. Meanwhile, across town, American merchants are calculating their profits at Russell & Company, one of the largest American trading firms in Canton. We cleared $200,000 on the last shipment, one says, checking his ledger. Turkish opium isn't as good as the Indian variety, but the margins are better. Another merchant looks troubled. My father writes from Boston, asking if the trade is moral. He's heard the missionaries' reports about the suffering. Warren Delano made a fortune in this trade, the first replies, referring to the grandfather of future US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Nobody questions his morality back in America. He's not wrong. The fortunes being made in the China trade, much of it from opium, were financing the Industrial Revolution back in America. The wealth from opium would eventually fund railways, factories, universities, and libraries. Some of America's most respectable families built their fortunes on the back of the opium trade. Look, the merchant continues, if we don't do it, the British will just take our share. At least we're bringing some of the wealth back to America. It's the classic rationalization. If I don't do it, someone else will. Might as well be me. Back at the harbour the next morning, you notice something new. Tension. Chinese soldiers are patrolling more aggressively. Officials are inspecting ships with greater scrutiny. The emperor in Beijing has finally noticed what's happening, explains a local guide. But it's too late. Too many people are involved in the trade now. Too many officials are addicted themselves. This was the terrible irony. By the time the imperial government in Beijing fully understood the extent of the crisis, many of the officials tasked with solving it were themselves addicted to opium. Imagine asking alcoholics to enforce prohibition. That's essentially what was happening. You've wandered into a tea house near the waterfront. The customers here are a mix of locals and foreign merchants. In one corner, you overhear two Chinese scholars in animated conversation. The barbarians bring poison and take our silver, one says bitterly, and our own people help them do it. What do you expect? Replies his companion. When I was a district magistrate in Jiangsu, my superior was smoking 3 pipes a day. How can we enforce the law when the law enforcers themselves are addicted? The first scholar leans forward. Do you know what I heard? In some villages in the interior, they're growing poppies now. Our own people growing the poison on our own soil. This was a new and frightening development. Domestic opium production was beginning in China itself, particularly in the southwestern provinces. It was still small compared to imports, but it was a sign of how deeply the opium economy had penetrated. Across the room, a group of British merchants are having drinks. One gestures toward the Chinese scholars. They blame us, but it's their corrupt officials who allow the trade to flourish, he says. We're just businessmen meeting demand. Exactly, his companion agrees. Nobody forces them to smoke. It's their choice. Their choice, a third merchant repeats, though he doesn't meet anyone's eyes as he says it. The hypocrisy was stunning. Back in Britain, opium was regulated and available only as medicine. The idea of opium dens operating openly in London would have been scandalous. Yet the same merchants who would have been outraged by such establishments at home were perfectly happy to profit from them in China. As evening falls, you find yourself near the waterfront again. A small Chinese smuggling boat is preparing to leave, loaded with goods. Where are they going? You ask a nearby porter. To meet the foreign ships anchored at Linton, he explains. They'll bring back opium. Aren't they afraid of getting caught? The porter laughs. The patrol boats? They're paid to look the other way. If one captain decides to actually enforce the law, the smugglers just wait until his shift ends. That night, from the window of your room, you watch as dozens of small boats slip out of the harbour under cover of darkness. They'll return before dawn, laden with chests of opium that will make their way to dens and private homes throughout Canton and the surrounding countryside. The next morning brings news. An imperial edict has arrived from Beijing. The emperor is demanding stronger action against the opium trade. You're in a tea house when you overhear local officials discussing it. The emperor doesn't understand, one says. If we truly cracked down, half the city would rise up in withdrawal pains. And where would we get the money to pay our troops, adds another. Tax collection is already down by half because of the silver crisis. This was the central problem. The opium trade had become so entrenched, so fundamental to the economy of southern China, that stopping it would cause immediate pain, both physical for the addicts and economic for everyone else. Yet allowing it to continue meant watching the country's wealth drain away and its people succumb to addiction. Later that day, you happen upon a Western doctor treating patients in a small clinic near the factories. Most of his patients are Chinese, many showing symptoms of opium addiction. The physical effects are devastating, he tells you between patients. Chronic constipation, loss of appetite, wasting of muscles. But the worst is the dependency. Once addicted, the body can't function without the drug. The withdrawal is excruciating. Vomiting, diarrhea, unbearable pain. Can they recover, you ask? The doctor sighs. Some do, with proper care and support, but most don't have that luxury, and the temptation to relapse is everywhere. As night falls on Canton, the cycle begins again. Smuggling boats slip out to meet the foreign ships. Opium dens fill with customers seeking escape. Silver changes hands, gradually flowing out of China coin by coin, tale by tale. In a luxurious merchant house, Hao Kwa sits alone, writing letters to his American partners about investments overseas. Even he, the richest man in Canton, can see what's coming. The system that made him wealthy is beginning to collapse. He's moving his money out while he still can. This is how empires fall, not all at once in a great battle, but gradually, invisibly, as their wealth drains away and their people lose the will or ability to work, to create, to build. The opium crisis wasn't just affecting individuals, it was eating away at the foundations of Chinese society itself. As you drift off to sleep that night, the sounds of Canton seem different than they did a decade ago. There's an edge of desperation to the city now. The confident hum of the world's greatest trading port has been replaced by something more frantic, more unstable. And in Beijing, thousands of miles away, an emperor sits reading reports of declining tax revenue, increasing addiction, and silver flowing out of his empire. Soon, very soon, he will decide that enough is enough. He will send one of his most capable officials to Canton with orders to end the opium trade by whatever means necessary. But by then, it might already be too late. The damage has been done, the addiction has taken hold, and the stage has been set for a confrontation that will change China and the world forever. The opium wars are coming. The weather has turned in Canton. Storm clouds gather over the harbour as a new officials' procession winds through the streets. It's March 1839, and everything is about to change again. Word spreads through the city like wildfire. Lin Zexu has arrived. Lin Zexu, the emperor's chosen one, his most trusted official, sent with a single mission: end the opium trade. At any cost, you're standing in the crowd as his procession passes. Banners wave, drums beat, and imperial guards clear the way. At the center of it all is a sedan chair carried by 8 men. Through the silk curtains, you catch a glimpse of the man who's about to shake the foundations of the greatest drug trade in history. Commissioner Lin isn't what you expected. He's not a fierce warrior or imposing figure. He's a scholar, a 54-year-old civil servant known for his incorruptible character and brilliant mind. But there's something in his expression, a steel-hard determination that sends chills down your spine. "He looks ordinary," whispers someone next to you, but they say even the most corrupt officials tremble when he arrives in their district. "The emperor chose well," another replies. "If anyone can stop the foreign poison, it's Lin." The crowd's reaction is mixed. Hope mingles with fear, because everyone in Canton knows what's coming: confrontation. After decades of allowing the opium trade to flourish, the imperial government has finally decided to act, and not with half measures or easily bribed local officials. This time they've sent their best. Later that day, you're sipping tea in a shop near the foreign factories when you overhear British merchants discussing the new arrival. "This Lin fellow has quite the reputation," one says nervously. "They call him the Iron-Handed Commissioner." "Bah!" scoffs another. "We've seen these crusaders before. A few well-placed bribes and he'll look the other way like all the rest." The first merchant shakes his head. "I've heard this one's different, incorruptible, and he has the emperor's full backing." "What's the worst he can do?" asks a third. "They need our trade too badly to risk any real action." Oh, how wrong they were. Within days of his arrival, Lin makes his intentions crystal clear. He orders the arrest of Chinese opium dealers, shutters, smoking dens across the city, and demands that foreign merchants surrender all their opium stocks. The foreign community is stunned. This isn't the usual posturing they've grown accustomed to. This is deadly serious. You're near the harbour when you witness something extraordinary. Local officials leading a prominent Chinese opium dealer to the public execution ground. The man is weeping, begging for mercy, but there is none to be found. Commissioner Lin has decided to make examples of major dealers. "Holy shit," mutters an American merchant standing nearby. "He actually executed him right in front of the factories." This wasn't just for show. Within 2 weeks of his arrival, Lin has arrested over 1,700 Chinese dealers and confiscated thousands of opium pipes. Addicts are rounded up and forced into improvised treatment centres. The city is in turmoil. But the biggest shock comes when Lin addresses the foreign merchants directly. He issues an ultimatum: surrender all opium within 3 days or face severe consequences. To drive his point home, he has the factories surrounded by Chinese troops. "He can't be serious," you overhear one British merchant say to another. "There must be 20,000 chests in the harbour, worth millions of pounds sterling." "Jardine got out just in time," his companion replies. "Sailed for London last month, left Dent and the rest of us to deal with this mess." That evening, you find yourself in a meeting of the foreign merchants. The atmosphere is tense. Charles Elliot, the British Superintendent of Trade, is trying to maintain calm, but panic is setting in. "Gentlemen, I advise compliance," Elliot says. Commissioner Lin appears quite determined. "Surrender millions in property," a merchant shouts, "without compensation? It's robbery." "Better than the alternative," another counters. "He's threatened to cut off our trade entirely, maybe worse." The room erupts in argument. Some want to stand firm, believing Lin is bluffing. Others are ready to give in, fearing for their lives and livelihoods. What these merchants don't realise is that Lin has come prepared for resistance. He's studied the foreigners carefully. He's even written a letter to Queen Victoria herself, appealing to her moral character. "I've heard that in your honourable country, the smoking of opium is strictly forbidden," his letter reads. "Since it is not permitted in your own country, then even less should you let it be passed on to harm other countries. How can you bear to make profit from harming others?" The irony is staggering. The British government strictly prohibited recreational opium use at home while simultaneously being the world's largest drug dealer abroad. The deadline passes. The foreign merchants have not complied. Lin makes his next move. All Chinese servants are ordered to leave the foreign factories. Food and water supplies are cut off. The foreign community finds itself under siege. "This is an outrage," bellows a British merchant as he paces inside the increasingly squalid factory compound. They can't treat British subjects this way, but Lin is just getting started. He intensifies the pressure, making it clear that the foreigners will not be allowed to leave until they surrender their opium. After 6 tense weeks of standoff, Charles Elliot makes a fateful decision. He orders all British merchants to surrender their opium to him, promising they'll be compensated by the British government. He then hands over the opium to Lin. The numbers are staggering: 20,283 chests of opium. That's about 1,300 tons of the drug, with a street value of roughly £2 million sterling, about $250 million in today's money. Now comes the most dramatic moment of all. Instead of keeping the opium or selling it, Lin orders its complete destruction. You're among the witnesses to what happens next. At a beach near the village of Human, just outside Canton, workers construct huge trenches lined with stone. The opium chests are brought in by the hundreds. Under Lin's watchful eye, workers break open each chest, dump the contents into the trenches and mix it with salt and lime before flushing it out to sea with water. "My God," whispers a British merchant watching from a boat offshore. He's actually destroying it all, not selling it, not storing it, destroying it. The process takes 23 days. More than 500 workers labour from dawn to dusk, and when it's over, the largest stash of illegal drugs ever seized in history has been completely eliminated. Lin doesn't stop there. He writes to the Emperor, reporting his success but also warning that the foreigners might seek revenge. He begins strengthening coastal defences, preparing for what he fears might come next. His fears are well-founded. When news reaches London that British property has been confiscated without compensation, there is outrage, not at the drug dealers but at the Chinese government for interfering with legitimate trade. The British Foreign Secretary, Lord Palmerston, is particularly incensed. The Chinese, he declares, must be taught that they cannot injure British subjects with impunity. Back in Canton, the foreign merchants are seething. They've been humiliated, confined to their factories, and forced to surrender valuable property. But more than that, their profitable trade has been disrupted. This cannot stand, Jardine tells his business associates back in London. The Chinese must be taught a lesson, preferably with British warships. Jardine and other merchants begin lobbying the British government for military action against China. They frame it not as a defence of the drug trade, but as a matter of national honour and free trade principles. Meanwhile, Lin Zexu believes he's won. The opium has been destroyed. The message has been sent. Surely now the foreigners will obey Chinese law. How wrong he was. The destruction of the opium at Human was not the end of the crisis. It was merely the spark that would ignite a much larger conflagration. You're in a tea house near the waterfront when you overhear Chinese merchants discussing the situation. Commissioner Lin is a great man, one says. He did what no one else dared to do. But at what cost, asks another. The foreign barbarians are angry. There's talk of warships coming. Let them come, says the first. What can their tiny kingdom do against the might of the Celestial Empire? This was the fatal miscalculation. The Chinese still believed they were the center of the world, the greatest power on Earth. They had no idea how far they'd fallen behind militarily. Meanwhile, Hao Kwa and the other Hong merchants find themselves in an impossible position. They're expected to control the foreigners, but have no real power to do so, and now they're being held personally responsible for the crisis. You witness Hao Kwa in conversation with Commissioner Lin. Even the richest man in Canton bows deeply before the Emperor's representative. The foreigners speak of war, Hao Kwa says quietly. Their warships have steam engines and iron hulls. Our junks cannot match them. You've grown too fond of these barbarians, Lin replies sharply. The Emperor's will is clear. No more opium. If they bring war, we will crush them as we have crushed barbarian invasions for thousands of years. Hao Kwa doesn't argue further, but his expression speaks volumes. He knows something Lin doesn't. The balance of power has shifted. China is no longer the technological and military superpower it once was. As summer turns to fall in 1839, tensions continue to rise. Small skirmishes break out between British and Chinese ships. Each side blames the other for provocation. You're on the waterfront when a Chinese official reads an imperial edict. All trade with Britain is suspended. The British factories are to be closed. This is it, says a merchant standing next to you. War is coming. And he's right. Back in London, Lord Palmerston has convinced Parliament to send an expeditionary force to China. Officially, it's to protect British lives and property. Unofficially, it's to force China to compensate the opium merchants and accept British trade on British terms, including the opium trade. As 1839 draws to a close, you notice a change in Canton. The Chinese are preparing for war, coastal defences are being strengthened, troops are drilling, new cannons are being installed along the waterfront. But there's something else too, a sense of uncertainty. Deep down, many Chinese officials suspect they're not ready for what's coming. You're sitting in a small restaurant when you overhear two Chinese naval officers talking quietly. I've seen their ships, one says, iron-sided steamers with guns that can fire explosive shells. Our wooden junks won't stand a chance. Don't say such things, the other warns. It's defeatist talk. Commissioner Lin would have you reported. The first officer leans closer. I'm not being defeatist. I'm being realistic. We're not ready for this fight. This was the tragedy unfolding. Lin Zexu, for all his moral clarity and determination, didn't understand what he was up against. He believed China's size and historical greatness would prevail against what he saw as a small island nation of barbarians. The British rely on China for tea, Lin wrote to the Emperor. Without our tea, they would develop eye infections and their economy would collapse. They need us more than we need them. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of the global situation. Britain was no longer a minor kingdom seeking trade privileges. It was becoming the world's dominant industrial and naval power. As the year ends, you witness one last meeting between Hao Kuo and his American trading partners. The mood is somber. War is coming, Hao Kuo tells them. The British have already decided, but Commissioner Lin doesn't see it. "What will you do?" asks one of the Americans. Hao Kuo sighs. "What can I do? I am caught between the Emperor's hammer and the British anvil. I've moved as much of my wealth overseas as possible. Now I can only wait and hope some of my businesses survive what's coming." The Americans exchange glances. They've already decided to remain neutral in the coming conflict. American ships will continue to trade with China even as British warships bombard Chinese ports. "This didn't have to happen," one of the Americans says quietly. "If we hadn't brought the opium, if not you, someone else would have," Hao Kuo replies. "The desire for profit is the same in all men, east or west. As 1839 gives way to 1840, the die is cast. British warships are already en route to China. The first shots of what will become known as the First Opium War are about to be fired." And Commissioner Lin? His determination remains unshaken. He continues to arrest opium dealers, strengthen defences, and prepare for a confrontation he believes China can win. "We have right on our side," he tells his officers. "The Celestial Empire has stood for thousands of years. We will not bow to barbarian demands to poison our people." His moral clarity is admirable. But in the coming war, moral clarity will prove no match for explosive shells and steam-powered warships. The greatest drug bust in history, the destruction of 20,000 chests of opium at Human, was supposed to end the opium crisis. Instead, it triggered a chain of events that would accelerate China's decline and change the balance of power in Asia for the next century. As you watch Chinese troops drilling on the waterfront, their spears and matchlock muskets gleaming in the winter sun, you can't help but wonder if they have any idea what's coming. They're preparing to fight a war from the previous century, not understanding that warfare itself has been transformed by the Industrial Revolution. The same technological gap that allowed Britain to mass-produce opium in India and transport it efficiently to China would now be turned to military purpose, and against that industrial might, even the largest empire on Earth would find itself helpless. The stage is set, the British are coming, and China is about to learn a terrible lesson about how the world has changed while the Middle Kingdom remained isolated behind its walls of tradition and pride. The war that would transform China forever was about to begin. June 1840, the quiet fishing village of Dinghai on Zhoushan Island wakes to an otherworldly sight. 24 British ships have appeared on the horizon overnight like monstrous sea creatures. 16 warships bristling with cannon, 4 armed steamers belching black smoke, 4 supply vessels. The Chinese coastal defenders stare in disbelief. They've never seen ships that can move without sails, never witnessed vessels made of iron instead of wood, never imagined cannon that can fire explosive shells over distances their own guns can't hope to reach. "What are those devil ships?" whispers a young Chinese soldier gripping his spear. His commander has no answer. How could he? Nothing in thousands of years of Chinese military history has prepared him for what's coming. You're witnessing the beginning of the First Opium War, watching from a fishing boat offshore as the British fleet takes position. What's about to unfold isn't just a battle, it's the violent collision of 2 worlds, one clinging to ancient traditions, the other transformed by the Industrial Revolution. The outcome was written before the first shot was fired. The British commander, Captain Charles Elliot, sends a message to shore: surrender or face bombardment. The Chinese commander refuses. He has his orders from Commissioner Lin and the Emperor himself. No compromise, no surrender. At noon, the British open fire. The sound is unlike anything the Chinese defenders have ever heard. Not just the familiar boom of cannon, but the shriek of explosive shells, a weapon they've never encountered. The British guns aren't firing solid balls. They're launching hollow iron projectiles filled with gunpowder that explode on impact, sending lethal fragments in all directions. "They can't possibly hit us from that distance," says a Chinese officer standing atop the coastal fort. Those are his last words. A British shell strikes the fort's wall directly below him. The explosion tears through stone and flesh with equal ease. When the smoke clears, the officer and a dozen defenders are gone. Just gone. The bombardment continues for hours. By evening, the Chinese coastal defences are in ruins. The British land marines and soldiers who quickly overwhelm the remaining defenders. Dinghai falls with barely a fight. "This is impossible," mutters a captured Chinese officer. "How could barbarians defeat the forces of the Celestial Empire so easily?" He's about to learn that his empire isn't as celestial as he believed. The British move methodically up the coast, capturing one port after another with minimal casualties. Their strategy is simple but devastating. Use naval power to bombard coastal defences from a safe distance, then land troops to secure the area once resistance has been broken. In the grand halls of Beijing, the emperor receives the news with disbelief. How can a small island of barbarians challenge the might of China? He demands of his advisors. "We outnumber them 100 to 1. A brave official steps forward. "Your Majesty, their weapons are different. Different. Our brave soldiers fight with swords and spears. The barbarians have machines that breathe fire and iron ships that move without wind." The emperor's face darkens. "You speak of them as if they are gods, not men. Are you suggesting the Celestial Empire cannot defeat these merchants?" No one dares answer directly. To suggest China might lose this war would be seen as treason, but the truth is becoming impossible to ignore. The technological gap between China and Britain isn't just a matter of better weapons. It represents an entirely different way of understanding the world. Back on the coast, you've managed to get aboard a Chinese war junk as a translator. From this vantage point, you witness the Battle of Kowloon. If battle is even the right word for such a one-sided affair, the Chinese fleet consists of war junks, large wooden sailing vessels with cannon that can fire iron balls about half a mile. They're arrayed in a defensive formation near the shore, ready to repel the British attack. Then you see it, the HMS Nemesis approaching through the morning mist. The Chinese sailors point and murmur in a mixture of fear and awe. They've heard rumours about this demon ship, but seeing it is something else entirely. The Nemesis is Britain's secret weapon, an iron-hulled steam